Hello and welcome to WION World is One. I'm Ghadi Francis and this is the West Asia Post, our weekly show where we bring you stories from the world's most volatile region. As the last US troops leave Afghanistan, West Asian leaders assembled in Baghdad, a summit aimed at easing regional tensions as well as address the resurgence of ISIS. It was Iraq's bid to become a regional mediator as enemies, Iran and Saudi Arabia, came face to face. While no major diplomatic breakthroughs were expected, in our next story, we tell you why this summit is crucial for the region.
Iraq is embarking a new role as a mediator for West Asian nations, playing a delicate balancing act in getting West Asian leaders in the same room. The Baghdad summit came at a time when the US troops were leaving Afghanistan. The Taliban now control the country, and West Asia is keeping an eye on its borders. The meeting was a chance for Iraq to act as a neutral mediator in the region, re-engaging with the world after decades of conflict, playing a unifying role to tackle multiple crises. In attendance were several heads of states: King Abdullah II of Jordan, Qatar Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, and French President Emmanuel Macron, who was co-organizing the meeting with Iraq.
The question many of those present here might ask is that why is France here? First of all, it is a great honor that my country is granted to be here at your side today and during such times. And then it is because, and you have understood this, that this conference is the result of a discussion, of a commitment that we took side by side with Iraq, and of a belief shared with Iraq's Prime Minister and President.
Un partenaire crédible, fiable et engagé pour chacun d'entre vous.
Kuwait and the UAE sent their heads of government, with Turkey sending its foreign minister. Also attending were the Iran and Saudi foreign ministers, a bid to ease hostilities between the two West Asian foes.
The Kingdom confirms its continuous commitment in supporting the security, stability and development of Iraq, as establishing the security, stability and the development in the region requires a secure, stable and sovereign Iraq, strongly connected to its Arab and Islamic surrounding.
The Islamic Republic hastened to extend a helping hand to brotherly and friendly Iraq on the path of combating terrorism and spared no effort in this regard. Just as the Iraqi people, parties, various groups, movements and institutions, as well as the Iraqi government, offered thousands of martyrs on the path to independence and combating terrorism.
Conflicts are not new in West Asia. Since the dawn of the 20th century, the region has seen one conflict after the other. But among all the uprisings, deadly civil wars and military insurgencies, two countries always seem to be involved: Saudi Arabia and Iran. The countries have a decades-long feud, one that dates back to 1979. Saudi Arabia saw itself as the leader of the Muslim world, but this was challenged by the birth of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The revolution in Iran meant one thing: a different idea of what the Muslim world should be. The two cannot see eye to eye, which is why talks of a secret meet caught everyone off guard. Reports claim that Iran and Saudi Arabia met, signaling a possible de-escalation, following several decades of animosity. Baghdad is brokering the talks. This is a significant step for Iraq. The country has ties with both the United States and Iran, and has often borne the brunt of Saudi-Iran rivalry. Another factor for leaders to come together is the crisis in Afghanistan. While no diplomatic breakthroughs were expected, an issue in focus was the resurgence of ISIS, especially after the fall of Afghanistan. For the Gulf Arabs, the Afghan takeover is an alarming sign. They have long leaned on the United States for security and remain concerned about the chaotic end to Washington's two-decade war in Afghanistan. In July, US President Joe Biden and Iraqi Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi sealed an agreement in the White House. Biden is ending US combat missions in Iraq by the end of 2021. But US forces will still operate there in an advisory role. Washington currently has 2,500 troops deployed to Iraq. The Iraqis, too, believe their army can ensure stability. But the fall of Afghanistan has left everyone in shock. The last time the United States tried to withdraw its troops in 2011, it was a perfect opportunity for the Islamic State to seize Mosul. Macron says that France will keep its troops in Iraq as part of anti-terrorism operations for as long as the government needs, regardless of whether or not the US decides to withdraw. The Islamic State is just remnants of its past right now. They are unlikely to take the Iraqi forces. But after the events in Afghanistan last month, Iraq, France and the whole of West Asia remain wary. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Away from Baghdad, the city of Mosul has been on every leader's travel list in Iraq. It was the last bastion of the ISIS in Iraq, and has been ever since visited by the world leaders such as Pope Francis and the French President Emmanuel Macron. But Mosul still struggles every day. Citizens are trying to rebuild the city without aid.
Shopkeeper Ahmed Riyad is busy serving customers again. He has returned to a market in Iraq's Mosul, 4 years after the city was destroyed in a violent battle against the ISIS. Mosul is the country's second city in the Nineveh province. It was the last major Iraqi bastion of the ISIS. The city was retaken by the Iraqi army and a US-led coalition after intense bombardment that left it in ruins. While life has gradually returned to normal, most of Mosul's residents still await war reparations.
We, the owners of the shops here, rebuilt our businesses using our own money, without the support of the government or any organization. Businesses have only recovered 10% in comparison to what it was in 2017.
According to Riyadh, the market was devastated. Of the 400 stalls that once crammed the area, just a tenth have returned to business. The cost of reconstruction would top $100 billion, a staggering sum for a country mired in an economic crisis. It outstrips the annual budget of oil-rich Iraq, which stands at nearly $90 billion in 2021. Mosul was once a melting pot of diverse ethnic communities, a key city on the West Asian trade route, lying close to both Turkey and Syria. But today, many buildings here are still in ruins, their facades dotted with bullet holes, and piles of rubble lie strewn all around.
Before the war, you could not walk in this market. A car could not park here. Work used to be great before the war, before 2014. Now we are doing okay.
When Pope Francis visited Mosul last March, he held a mass for the Christians left in Iraq, standing in front of partially collapsed walls. This week, French President Emmanuel Macron visited another iconic site, the Al-Nouri Mosque, that was blown up by the ISIS.
We will be with you in order to help for this mutual respect to rebuild monuments, church, schools, mosques and minarets and so on, but we will help as well to build economic opportunity.
Macron pledged help, like many do in Mosul. But reconstruction in the city is patchy and slow. While 80% of basic infrastructure has been restored, only around a third of health facilities have been rebuilt. With just 2 months to go for the parliamentary elections, the slow pace even prompted the Iraqi Prime Minister to visit. For the citizens of Mosul, there is little hope. They blame the centralized nature of the Iraqi state and the graft-riddled bureaucracy that governs it. With funds for reconstruction running low, the bullet-ridden buildings are the only reminder of a once vibrant city. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
From Iraq to Yemen and Lebanon, we have a lot more lined up for today. But first, as usual, let's take a look at what else is making the headlines across West Asia.
The Lebanese government says it has received no request for fuel to be imported from Iran. This confirms the fact that Hezbollah bypassed the state with a move to import Iranian fuel. Qatar's foreign minister says that he cannot comment on when the Kabul International Airport will be fully functional again. He added that getting the airport up and running again remains Qatar's focus in the short term. The main commercial crossing between Israel and Gaza was opened for imports after Israel approved measures to ease its blockade of the Strip. This comes after the import of construction material was allowed for rebuilding Gaza. The new school year started in Israel with 2.4 million students returning to class. The move comes even as the Delta variant fuels a surge in infections across the country.
At least 30 soldiers were killed and 60 others were wounded as Houthi rebels attacked Yemen's largest base housing Saudi-led forces. This comes as the war-torn nation remains one step away from famine.
They say nations win wars, but humanity loses. Words tailor-made for the crisis in Yemen. The Houthi rebels are an emboldened lot. They are striking at Yemen's largest military base, killing members of the Saudi-led forces. The attack targeted the Al Anad military base located in the government-held southern province of Lahij. It was carried out using armed drones and ballistic missiles. At least 30 soldiers were killed in the attack, 60 others were wounded by the sudden offensive.
We were gathered inside the hangar. We saw an aircraft hovering and we tried to fire at it and bring it down, but we couldn't hit it. The craft flew over and headed directly towards the hangar, where it fired 2 missiles at the first unit. We couldn't see the aircraft, we just heard it. We were surprised by the missiles hitting the hangar.
The attack came at a time when peace talks between the Saudi-led coalition and the Houthis have stalled after both sides failed to reach a compromise deal. But the attacks did not stop here. On the ground, an atrocious offensive is underway in Marib, the last government stronghold. It's a bloody battle. 65 people were killed in a single day's fighting. If Marib falls, Houthis will have an upper hand. But thousands of civilians in refugee camps will have to fend for themselves. What's happening in Yemen is a tit-for-tat war. Strikes followed by retaliatory strikes and then preemptive strikes. All this while civilians on the ground watch on as firepower raises hopes for a better life. This isn't a battle for Yemen anymore. It's a theatre for the West Asian Cold War. A strip of land where Saudi Arabia and Iran can unleash a battle of egos. The Yemenis are merely pawns in the game, expendable. Yemen is one step away from a famine. The war has killed thousands, leaving behind a conflict-ridden nation, where 80% of the population depends on aid. So where does this end? The United Nations is still nursing hopes of a ceasefire. But why would the Houthis take the bait? Especially since they are gaining on Marib. As for the Saudis, this is the Crown Prince's personal battle. A war he pulled his country into. This to and fro will likely continue. In the end, one side will emerge victorious. But the question is, will they still have a country left to rule? West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Just days after Joe Biden met with Naftali Bennett at the White House, the Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz met with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, the first high-level meeting between the two sides in years. It comes at a time when a very fragile ceasefire is holding in Gaza, as Hamas condemns the visit by Gantz. We tell you more.
A delayed meeting due to Afghan bombing, uneasy relations with a predecessor, and grappling to find common ground. Bennett and Biden's meeting at the White House was overshadowed by a lot of issues. But the two leaders finally decided to agree on one agenda: Iran.
We're also going to discuss the threat from Iran and our commitment to ensure Iran never develops a nuclear weapon. But we're putting diplomacy first and seeing where that takes us.
Iran is the world's #1 exporter of terror, instability, and human rights violations. And as we sit here right now, the Iranians are spinning their centrifuges in Natanz and Fordow. And we got to stop it. And we both agree.
Bennett's visit was meant to reset tones with the US. He sought to move on from Netanyahu's combative public style, instead managing disagreements behind closed doors. After all, Washington is one of its closest allies. For Biden, the visit was a chance to display normalcy, to demonstrate business as usual with a key partner, as his credibility was being questioned by both friends and foes. But it's not just Iran that the US discussed. Another issue of contention was Palestine. Unlike the Trump administration, Biden has supported the two-state solution, including the reopening of Jerusalem consulate. It has been a base for diplomatic outreach to Palestinians, but the Trump administration closed it down, moving the US embassy to Tel Aviv. It was among several moves that incensed the Palestinians, who want East Jerusalem as a capital of a future state. Talks about reopening the consulate have already irked Israel. Israel considers all of Jerusalem as its undivided capital, a status that is not recognized internationally.
We've told America we think it's a bad idea because for two reasons. One is, the consulate was there for 130 years. I know the history, but once it was closed, reopening it will send the wrong message. We feel it will send the wrong message, not only to the region, not only to the Palestinians, but also to other countries. And we don't want this to happen. And besides, we have an interesting yet delicate structure of our government, and we think this might destabilize this government.
While Israel thinks it may destabilize the government, it is another meeting that is taking the region by storm. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas met with Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz in Ramallah, the highest-level meeting between Abbas and a cabinet minister in years. The stepped-up contacts and gestures mark a shift from the complete breakdown in communication. According to reports, the two discussed many possible steps towards improving relations. While Bennett has always opposed Palestinian statehood, his coalition government consists of a myriad of parities. This makeup could make any sensitive decision on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict extremely difficult. For Abbas, the growing popularity of the Hamas has been alarming. Palestinian politics has been in gridlock since Hamas gained parliamentary majority in 2006. Elections have been suspended there since. The stalemate soon gave way to a divide. The Hamas controlled the Gaza Strip, while the Palestinian Liberation Organization clung to power in the West Bank. A foreign trip overshadowed by the Afghanistan chaos, a secret meeting in Ramallah, and talks about a controversial consulate reopening. We've seen these overtures before in West Asia. Many regimes have tried their own strategies. Will this one be any different? West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
For all of you out there, Lebanon is a country you hear about in the news. We usually report to you about the deadly blast, the financial collapse, the political deadlock, the fuel shortage, the power cuts, the civil unrest. These are all happening in Lebanon. But what we also must tell you is that people are still gathering, partying, and tourism never stopped. We are here living dual lives, almost dystopian in nature. This small Mediterranean country has a unique identity in the region, a society where cosmopolitan culture blends the multiple sects, ideologies, and communities. Global reports have highlighted the Beirut nightlife as one of the best in the world. As for culture, you see historical temples everywhere, castles and tourist attractions, theaters, events, and museums. The Lebanese diaspora around the world is huge in comparison. The people of this land have always been travelers since the time of the Phoenicians thousands of years ago. They built boats from cedar trees and have always been voyagers. The number of Lebanese abroad is said to be more than triple the number of residents here. In Southern America, Australia, Africa, and also the GCC, these Lebanese outside Lebanon are a lifeline that provides billions of dollars yearly to the local economy through their families, investments, and their trips to their homeland.
كان عم بفوت بالنهار 22,000 زائر إلى لبنان.
To start with, Lebanon is my mother country. I lived in Canada, this is true. I did my studies, but I love Lebanon a lot. I decided to come back.
Radik Afghali is a Lebanese-Canadian woman, now activist, that can be an example relatable to more than half the Lebanese.
Okay, let me tell you this. We're not living in La La Land, okay? Life is going to continue. We have our part of the social work, and this is everybody's doing that. Lots of people from outside are helping us with that. And we also have the right to live a normal life where we can actually, summer is gorgeous in Lebanon, and we are going to make use of that. It's balanced. So the social work on the side, it takes a lot of our time too. And at the same time, we're not going to miss out on the partying. I'm just going to say I want everybody from outside to come and visit. We need the diaspora people to come and visit, spend their money here. They can help out with lots of things, and lots of people from outside are helping out not only with medicine, also with the baby milk, also with clothes, lots of people with diapers. I cannot tell you and I cannot express how these people are really helping out.
With a tear and a smile, the Lebanese paradox is not new. It is rather a part of the character here, in a country where soldiers and civil war leaders used to fight and kill each other in the daytime at the front lines and meet at night in the same Beirut bar to have a drink. Radi Francis, West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One. That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay home and stay safe. I am Radi Francis, and you're watching WION, World is One.